All right, pleasure being with you. It's a very busy day. I'm Chris Merrill. He is Joe Huizenga. Joe sent me a message this morning about 10:02 and said, the ruling came down, and I didn't think it was going to go this way. He said the ruling came down, and abortion is now illegal in Arizona, courtesy of a law written in 1964.
1864.
1864. Yeah.
160 years ago.
Wow. So how are we to interpret this? We bring in our KTAR legal analyst, Barry Markson. And Barry, help me understand, first of all, what was the lawsuit? Why did we have the lawsuit? And why are we, before we get into why they decided this way, what is sort of the legal angle here as far as the ruling today?
So after Roe v. Wade was overturned with the Dobbs decision, the Attorney General, then Mark Brnovich and others, filed a suit saying that they needed an Arizona court to overturn an order that had been issued in Pima County in 1973, staying the 1864 pre-statehood Arizona law banning all abortion. So when Roe v. Wade was when Roe v. Wade decision came down in 1973, states had to do something about their existing laws. So there was a suit filed, and the court ordered that law was stayed as a result of Roe v. Wade.
Why
so
not
this
just?
Lawsuit was designed to.
I'm sorry, Barry, but why not just overturn that territorial law? Why did they effectively suspend that old law at the time? Why not just write a new law?
Well, maybe they thought they'd get a new case in front of the Supreme Court and change Roe v. Wade. It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that back in 1973, but what they did was just stay the law so that Arizona law was consistent with national law now as a result of Roe v. Wade. And that's what this lawsuit, the underlying lawsuit that we're dealing with here, was designed to deal with. It had to get rid of that stay in order to get Arizona law, to get that particular Arizona law, the 1864 law, back to being enforceable. And that's what the Republican Attorney General at the time and others who were anti-abortion, that's what they did to kind of get us to where we are today.
Talking with our legal expert, Barry Markson, joining us to discuss abortions being banned in Arizona after the state Supreme Court upheld an 1864 law. And Barry, why is there a waiting period of 14 days now before this ruling goes into effect? What's the point of that?
Well, basically the court held that the 1864 law is enforceable. So that is now that is the law of the land in Arizona. Abortion is banned in Arizona unless it's to save the life of the mother. The 14 days is in place because the court remanded it, sent back small portions of the case due to some other constitutional issues that the court addressed in its order. It sent it back to the trial court, the lower court, to look at those issues. So it gave 14 days for the trial court to kind of get the case, to reassess where it is, to have hearings, whatever the trial court decides. And then also said the trial court has the option of granting or extending that stay. It'll grant its own stay if it feels it's necessary. So if the trial court thinks briefing and oral argument on some of these other smaller issues is important, it can grant a stay beyond the 14 days, and that's certainly possible. So we'll see what the judge does there. But that's why there's a short stay, because part of the case was what we call remanded, sent back. So
it's a tough question to answer, but you said it's possible. How likely is it that they extend that stay beyond the 14 days and we don't end up going back to this 1864 law as a result? Well, again, it depends on the issues and what the lower court judge thinks is necessary to resolve those issues. I mean, I will tell you, I don't know that an additional stay is necessary. The judge may also believe that this is a huge monumental change. So we're going from Arizona currently is enforcing that 2022 law that allowed for 15 weeks. You could have an abortion up to 15 weeks from the date of pregnancy. That's a major change for people. And so the court may just decide, hey, a little more time is necessary to do that. But the Arizona Supreme Court did not do that. They granted the 14-day stay simply to allow the lower court to decide these other issues. So I don't know that the lower court is going to do something beyond what the Arizona Supreme Court did. So they're asking me, is the lower court judge going to grant an additional stay? My guess would be no. But that certainly, again, I'm a little surprised the Supreme Court did what it did here. Somebody may look at this and say, hey, let's slow down a little bit and figure out where we are.
So I want to key in on what you just said about being surprised that the Supreme Court did what they did. And we'll dive into that in our next segment called The Why, Barry, because I think many of us are trying to figure out what the logic was on that. So I want to do that. But prior to getting to that, Barry Markson, our KTAR legal analyst, I was reading some of the effects on this, and I know that you do some writing for some national publications as well, and I happen to see this in the AZ Central article. It said one immediate effect of the ruling could be more support for a potential ballot measure in the works for this year. Advocates say they've already got more than 500,000 signatures, well above the threshold needed by an early July deadline. That's to put a constitutional amendment that would, what do you say, codify? Is that the hot word of the year? Codify the right to choose for a woman. We've seen this motivate a number of voters in other states. Did the Republicans just lose a swing state with this verdict?
Yeah, I think they did, and it's a great question, Chris. And I'll tell you, you're watching online now on social media. The Republicans in Arizona are backpedaling so fast. I'm amazed they're not falling down. The Republicans, starting with Governor Doug Ducey and the state legislators at the time, the Republican state legislators, all voted for this 2022 measure, which they're saying was just to create this 15-week timeline. It was a 15-week restriction, which, by the way, was much more restrictive than the prior Arizona law. But it wasn't just to create the 15-week restriction. The law specifically said, it was clear language, that if Roe v. Wade was overturned by the court, and they knew that was possible because it was in front of the court right then, that if Roe v. Wade was overturned, the 2022 law goes away and the 1864 law comes back. That's the law of Arizona. So all these Republicans who you're seeing now on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, and saying, I didn't want this, and I think it should be 15 weeks, and we should be heeding the opinion of the constituents, all of them voted for this law. They voted knowing this could happen, knowing it was likely, and they did it because that's what they wanted. Because in 2022, being anti-abortion was great politically. Now, 2 years later, we know it's bad. Right? I mean, politically, Republicans know this is a bad issue for them, and they're going to lose elections because of this. So now you're watching them all backpedal. But let's not forget, they're the ones who put this in place. Any one of them, anyone in the legislature or the governor could have vetoed this. Any one of them could have stopped this. And instead, the Republicans made this happen. And now they're looking up now in hindsight and saying, boy, that was a huge mistake, and acting like they didn't do it. They did it.
The Arizona Supreme Court issued a ruling going back to an 1864 law that's effectively banned abortion here in Arizona. Our legal expert, Barry Markson, with us right now. Barry, is there any chance, in light of what you just said then, with the legislature, if you have a number of GOP lawmakers out there saying, gosh, this could be really bad for me and my future, could the legislature take action on something between now and November when that Arizona Abortion Access Act would be on the ballot for voters?
Well, yeah. I mean, they absolutely could. The legislators is still in session. They're doing one session a week right now, one meeting a week right now, because they're trying to figure out the budget. So they've slowed things down. You remember last year they did this. They took a couple of months off here and there, and so sure, so that could happen. I would guess that at least half of the Republican conference in both the House and the Senate would vote for a 15-week ban and coming up with something kind of more moderate. I've been saying this, by the way, as soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned, I was saying on the radio that that's what Republicans should be doing, because otherwise they're going to be in this position sometime down the future where people are going to be voting on this, but they didn't do it because they didn't want to create that situation. So in any case, yes, could something happen? It could, but is the Republican leadership there going to go against half of their conference? Are they going to put something out there for a full vote of the Senate and the House when half of Republicans aren't going to vote for it? You know how that works. If they don't get the majority of the Republicans, they don't put it out there. I mean, so if they stay with their own little local rules, I don't think it'll happen. The other part of it, Joe, is are the Democrats going to cooperate with this on anything that is restrictive? Because the Democrats think we should go back to what we had when Roe v. Wade was in place, right? Which was, until fetal viability, until about 22 weeks. And that's what's going to be on the ballot in November for Arizonans. We're going to be able to vote on that ourselves for a constitutional amendment to ensure and enshrine the right to an abortion in the Arizona Constitution. So are Democrats or Governor Hobbs, are they going to help Republicans dig themselves out of the hole they created? My guess is no.
And we're wondering why. What's the why? Our segment every day, sponsored by This Space for Rent. Joining us right now is Barry Markson, our KTAR legal analyst, as the Arizona Supreme Court revives an 1864 law that bans all abortions in the state. Now, that law came about when Arizona was not a state. It was just a territory. In fact, a lot of things were different in 1864 than they are now, not just the fact that we didn't have air conditioning. So there were a lot of differences. We'll discuss that a little bit later on. So, Barry, I wanted to ask you this. How did they come to this conclusion, these justices? And I think there's going to be a lot made in the national media about the political leanings of the six justices who ruled on this. Bill Montgomery, the seventh, he recused himself from the case. Was this purely a legal matter? I mean, you mentioned Republicans backpedaling on the issue. It seems like from a political standpoint, this didn't go very well for the Republicans. So one thing people love to do is say, well, the justices are activist judges and they only rule in favor of whatever their party wants. Is this partisan or was this purely a legal matter?
It was a legal matter. I'm actually very impressed with what the Arizona Supreme Court did. They very directly said, we are not deciding what Arizona's abortion law is. That's something for the people and the legislature to decide. What we're charged with is to look at the laws, the statutes that are in front of us, discuss their constitutionality, and interpret those laws. And that's what they did. And this was, people have been asking me this as we were approaching this decision, what I thought the Supreme Court would do. And I actually said I thought they would find a way to keep the 15 weeks in place because I thought that was more politically stable, and I thought they might find a way legally to make that happen. Yeah. But I said if they're going to follow the law, then the law is pretty clear because the 2022 law that the Republican legislature passed and Governor Ducey signed, it just flat out says it in there. It's very clear. It says that if Roe v. Wade was overturned, the 2022 law goes away, and the current the long-standing Arizona law would be in effect. And the Supreme Court looked at this and said, yeah. That's what this says. So I think what they did was strictly based on a legal basis. I think they tried to avoid any kind of activism and really interpreted the statutes. And this is something, if you want to blame somebody for this, blame the legislature that passed this law. This law could have been passed. They could have had a 15-week law without this extra clause, if Roe v. Wade was overturned, that easily would have passed. They could have done that. They didn't do it. They didn't do it on purpose because this is what they wanted. They didn't realize back then in 2022 the political ramifications for what they were doing.
Barry, I can't think of another example where we write a law saying that this law will be null and void if this law is legal. That's the bizarrest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, to have something to be contemplating how a court may in the future rule. I agree with you, Chris. You don't see that very often. We're forgetting now because we know over the last year and a half or whatever, 2 years since Roe v. Wade was overturned, we know how bad politically this is for Republicans and those who are anti-abortion or pro-life. We know what that is. But back then they didn't know. Back then it had been decades where people were pushing to ban abortion. And the folks who were doing that, they did it every chance they could. Not a year went by when there wasn't another abortion restriction bill that was put in front of Doug Ducey's on his desk, and every year he signed it, and every year they put another one up because they were being pushed by Kathy Herod and the folks here in Arizona who wanted to get rid of abortion. And they did it. They finally did it. It took decades. They finally did it. And now they're all jumping up and down like a water on a hot pan. And like, what do we do now? Because they know this will destroy Republicans in November. It's amazing to watch on Twitter and on social media. The Republicans Doug Ducey put a big post out saying this isn't what he thought, what he wanted, and it is exactly what he wanted. He could have vetoed this bill. But he didn't want to because he didn't want to be the governor who vetoed an abortion restriction bill. So he didn't do it. Any one of those legislators who are today saying this isn't what I wanted, any one of them could have voted no, but not one of them did. So they're getting what they wanted. They just don't like the ramifications of it today.
Our legal expert, Barry Markson, with us talking about most abortions being banned in Arizona after the state Supreme Court upheld an 1864 law. Barry, this I think is largely procedural. You tell me yay or nay. So the Arizona Medical Association and a Phoenix doctor had sued to block enforcement of this pre-Roe ban. And I read today that suit could now be revived. Why is that? Just because this is the law on the books again now?
Yeah, because now the law in Arizona has changed, so other people may think they have standing to file lawsuits because they somehow feel they've been aggrieved or their rights have been violated. So yes, I mean, this is a drastic change in Arizona's abortion law, and I expect you may find other lawsuits from this. You know, we've seen lawsuits in Texas, for example, which has a 6-week abortion ban, which is now less restrictive than Arizona, believe it or not. And you remember seeing those, the women who needed a medical abortion, but doctors wouldn't do it because it wasn't conclusively necessary to save her life, but it may have risked her life, and it certainly was risking her ability to have a baby in the future. And these are folks who wanted babies. They just had a medical problem with this pregnancy, and they filed lawsuits in Texas to try to get those rights back. And the Texas Supreme Court ended up rejecting that, and that woman had to fly out of state to go have her pregnancy terminated for medical reasons. And we're going to be facing that here in Arizona once this stay is lifted. That's exactly what we're going to have here in Arizona. It's incredibly scary. We're talking about this from a legal perspective or political, but imagine if you're a woman or a family in Arizona and you have a medical issue with a pregnancy, and now no doctor will perform an abortion because they don't want to risk going to prison. Because this law, we haven't even talked about that, but that 1864 law comes with a felony conviction for anybody who helps a woman have an abortion, and the prison time is 2 to 5 years. That's the sentence. So you're not going to see doctors performing abortions in Arizona once the stay is lifted.
Real quick one, and then we're going to get you out of here. Attorney General Chris Mays has promised that no doctor or woman would be prosecuted under the abortion law. Is that enough to make doctors feel safe to perform abortions or women to seek them here in Arizona?
Well, first of all, I will say that the 2022 law did take away the criminal aspect of it for women, so I don't expect that would be a problem anyway. The Attorney General had previously said that she tried to say that county attorneys would not have authority to bring criminal charges against somebody enforcing this law. Whether or not that's an enforceable order from the Attorney General, I don't know. So if a county attorney in Mojave County wants to bring criminal charges against a doctor who performs an abortion, is that county attorney not going to be permitted to do that? I don't know. I would question the ability of the Attorney General to limit that. So I would say it's an absolute concern that in counties where you have anti-abortion prosecutors, those charges could be brought. But I'm going to tell you guys, look at Texas. They have that 6-week law. Texas used to have about 50,000 abortions a year. Now they have 6. Not 6,000, 6.
Wow.
And that's what this is. It's when you start to tell doctors that they can be in prison for doing abortions, they stop doing abortions.
Abortions essentially banned in Arizona after the state Supreme Court issued a very highly anticipated ruling today that turns back the clock to a law passed in 1864. Our legal expert, Barry Markson, joins us, broke it all down with us. Thank you so much, Barry. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching The Chris and Joe Show. Click to see more from Chris and Joe, and tap the button in the middle to subscribe to KTAR News.